Hi there, it's April the 29th, and we're concluding today our journey through the good news of Luke. We're reading in chapter 24 and we're reading verses 13 to 53. So we take up the story of the resurrection, the Easter Sunday story, and we find two disciples, two friends of Jesus, walking from Jerusalem to the northwest to the village of Emmaus, about 7 or 8 miles away from Jerusalem. And they are talking about what has happened, talking about the terrible things that have gone on. One of them's called Cleopas. We don't know the name of the other one. But as they're talking, another figure draws alongside them and is walking with them. Common enough on the roads of those days, with many people walking about. So they are so engrossed in their conversation that they don't think about who this is. They certainly would never have even thought about, could this be Jesus? And so it says that he was kept from being recognized by them. And as they walk, he asks them, why are you so down? What are you discussing? And they say, well, we're talking about what's happened to Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, and we expected him to be the Messiah of Israel, and now he's been taken, he's been crucified. And Jesus says, oh, don't you understand what the Messiah was supposed to do? And he opens their minds and their hearts to the scriptures. And it's wonderful that Jesus goes back into the story. Remember here, Jesus doesn't have what we call a New Testament. He doesn't have any Greek scriptures to work with. He has only the Hebrew scriptures. And from these, he shares with them this amazing story pointing to his death and resurrection and to his glory. And as they come near to Emmaus, it's getting dark, so they say, Jesus, come in, or they don't say Jesus, they say to the stranger, come in and have a meal with us. And as he's sitting at table with them, and as he breaks bread, now we don't know exactly how, whether it's a particular blessing he used, or a form of the blessing, or whether it's they saw the marks in his hands, they recognize Jesus. It says their eyes are opened, and then he's taken from their sight. He disappears, and then they say to one another, these two disciples, Cleopas and his friend, didn't our hearts burn within us when he talked with us on the road? There was something about the encounter with Jesus. It wasn't the mental logic. It wasn't the understanding of the scriptures. It was something in their soul, something in their being that Jesus ignited as he spoke with them by his Spirit. And they're so excited about what they've seen and what they've experienced that they run back, even though it's now nightfall and night has come. They go the 7 miles back to Jerusalem to tell the disciples, and you can picture them bursting in on them. And as they come, Jesus himself is there among his friends, among his disciples, and he says, peace be with you. Now, the disciples are really grappling with what they're seeing. They can't get hold of the reality of it. And it says, even though they were filled with joy and yet filled with unbelief at one point, Jesus is trying to think of a way to just connect with them and say this is true. And so he takes a piece of fish. It's a beautiful, ordinary moment where he takes a piece of fish and he eats it. And he says, look, flesh and spirits, if I was a ghost, I wouldn't have flesh and bones like you see I have. And they realize that Jesus is there with them. Jesus is back with them. And then he says to them, don't go away from Jerusalem, but stay and wait for the promise of the Father. This is the next stage. Jesus is saying this is not the end. He's not staying around. He's saying this is not the end of the story. And of course we know this is Luke writing, and this is Luke chapter 1, and it says, or Luke volume 1. Volume 2 is about to come. So Jesus says, wait for volume 2 to be published. Wait in Jerusalem until the promise of the Father comes. And then he takes them out to Bethany, onto the Mount of Olives, and there he's taken from their sight, having commanded them to go into all the world and to share the good news of repentance, of teshuvah in Hebrew, of this homecoming and forgiveness of sins, the erasure of sins, the removal of sins. And this is the great good news with which Luke closes his gospel, and with which he points towards the Acts that he's going to be writing, and maybe had even started writing at this point. This is such a wonderful ending to this amazing story, this amazing detailed story, because Luke is the physician. He has an eye to detail. He has an eye particularly to the compassion of Jesus. And as we leave Luke now and we're moving on later into John, we're just astounded, like the disciples were, at the amazing story of this Jesus of Nazareth, this one who is the great prophet, the one who is Messiah, who God has anointed, and who we still carry with us in his glory day by day today. Have a really good April the 29th.